Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of Speaking Seagulls, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I'm Nick Vete. He's Ricardo Martinez Paz. We have another episode coming at you today. We've taken a little bit of time off since the Steelers and Eagles were both eliminated in the wild card round, but we are back now, and we've got some pretty important news to break down as the Steelers have hired a new offensive coordinator, and the Eagles, for the second year in a row, have replaced both of their coordinators. So I already see Ricardo shaking his head. I'm not sure what that means. We'll dive into it as we talk about both of these moves. But before we do any of that, I ask Ricardo, how are you doing today, my friend?
Well, I'm good, man. I mean, I feel like this morning I woke up, I was like, man, I can't wait to talk about the Eagles and Steelers and on all these moves that have happened the last 2 weeks because I'm just pumped up, man, for that because it's gonna be interesting. But no, I'm good overall. How are you, man?
I'm doing good, man. I can't complain. Definitely kind of that point in the, we've seen all the head coaching moves kind of come and now they're all filled, dude. I mean, before we jump into this, can we just talk about just generally overall speaking, like any surprises that you've had or I've had since this like coaches hiring cycle went? Because we've seen some big names that got, fired or parted ways with their organization. And there's still some big names that are out there. I mean, there's some positions open for coordinator spots, but all the head coaching positions have been filled. I don't know. What are kind of some of your initial reactions or just like takeaways from the coaching cycle so far? And some big
Yeah.
names obviously not getting new jobs.
I mean, there's a few. I mean, Ben Johnson staying with the Lions, Gerard Johnson, I believe, staying with the Texans, and same with Ben Slowick, I believe his name is, or Bobby
Yeah,
Slowick, sorry.
Bobby Slowick.
Yeah, like those three, I was like shocked that they didn't, well, at least Gerard Johnson, maybe offensive coordinator, which the Steelers interviewed for, but
Yeah,
I mean, the other two, I was like, wow, they really decided to stick it out. Like, I respect it for like first off, because I mean, those two guys could have easily had a head coaching position, and I mean, I feel like they'll still have that door open next year. Um, but I mean, just being, given how young they are, and I guess with them wanting to stick it out another year and see if they can, I guess, get over the hump, maybe, perhaps. I
yeah,
mean, CJ Stroud's no joke. I mean, he's such a good rookie season. Jared Goff also arguably his best year, and I'm sure Ben Johnson's kind of kicking himself after the game that they kind of blew against the Niners. But I'm
yeah.
glad they're staying. I because I didn't want Ben Johnson to the Commanders personally, but then getting Dan Quinn was interesting. But I don't know how that's really going to work out. I feel like he's like a defensive coordinator. He's great. A head coach, not as great. So, but some of
It
those other
also feels
guys,
very. I mean, this is relevant because it's the same division as the Eagles, but
yeah,
it feels very similar to a Ron Rivera, where it's like a guy
yeah,
who more defensive minded, kind of on that side of the ball, and clearly has kind of built his presence as like a leader of the locker room.
yeah,
Versus kind of more of these hires we've seen of young offensive gurus. So it feels very similar to the coach they just moved on from.
yeah.
Obviously, Dan Quinn a little bit younger than Ron Rivera as well, but
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, he's had a lot of success as the defensive coordinator of the Cowboys. The Dallas will certainly miss him. But I was
Yeah.
with you. That one was a little bit of a head scratcher too. I was also thinking. I mean, I'm curious your thoughts on this. To me, there were some, really capable head coaches, former head coaches that were, let go and are still Mike Vrabel still being out there and
Yeah.
available. The
Mhm.
fact that Bill Belichick, the best coach of all time, only got an interview with the Falcons. That was all he got an
Yeah.
interview with. I mean, none of these other franchises wanted to take a shot on him or even give him an interview. So, I mean, those were kind of the things that jumped off the page for me. I mean, I know Pete Carroll's getting up there in age, but I didn't
Yeah.
even hear of him getting an interview with any franchise. So all of that was super interesting to me that none of these guys were really garnering any interest.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just the age factor. I mean, maybe it's just like teams wanted to get younger and, um, I mean, Dan Quinn probably the real exception for that. And I mean, that's probably why. I mean, the game, I mean, it's yeah, it's really kind of hard to believe that Vrabel and Belichick, more so Belichick, didn't get jobs as head coaches somewhere else. I mean, yeah, the Falcons, the fact that he was the only team that was the only team he interviewed with, I was like, wow, you would think maybe. Well, I guess part of that also was like the Eagles and Cowboys kind of not firing their head coaches. So the Eagles were apparently very heavily linked with Bill Belichick, which is interesting. But
Interesting. Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, maybe they just wasn't a fit. I mean, the Chargers was the only place I saw realistically that he could have gone, but then Harbaugh obviously went there, and I mean, I love that one. I mean, I hope the Chargers are, relevant
Yeah.
and kind of get out
I
of this like funk of
I think they hit a home run with that hire because he's had success everywhere he's gone, and maybe it
yeah,
is just that type of thing. I mean, Mike Vrabel, I could see him getting a defensive coordinator position. With one of these teams that still have DC openings, but Bill
yeah,
Belichick, I mean, he's probably just going to be out of football for a year. I don't know if he's going to have something
probably.
else that he wants to do. Maybe and I mean, maybe this will transition us a little bit, but kind of like Vic Fangio. I mean, he had that sort of sabbatical year, as he called it, before he joined the Dolphins, and he spent some time
Yeah,
working with the Eagles in their preparation for the championship game 2 years ago in the Super Bowl. Obviously, maybe
hmm
that's something Bill Belichick does so he can still kind of stay connected to the game, but maybe it also rejuvenates him a little bit. But I'd be shocked if I can't imagine that he's ready to be done, knowing how close he is to the
yeah,
all-time win record for a head coach. And I gotta imagine he still has that desire to try to win a Super Bowl without Brady. Maybe it is the type of thing where if the Cowboys again can't get it done next year, that's a position he looks to go. Or maybe one of these other franchises that's a little bit of a surprise that's kind of ready. Once it came down to just the Commanders and Seahawks, you knew it wasn't good. Like he wasn't going to those
yeah,
organizations. It's
yeah,
got to be the
exactly.
right fit for him, and I guess it just wasn't in either of these spots, or
Yeah,
and really, I guess any of these spots outside of LA, like you said.
yeah, it just has to be a team that's like ready to win, like now. Because I mean, and the other thing was like he was the GM as as on top of being the head coach with the Patriots, so maybe that had something to do with it a little bit. But I mean, that he'll certainly still be connected with the game in
Yeah,
some capacity this
yeah,
coming season.
absolutely. So let's talk. Let's dive into these coordinator moves for the Steelers and Eagles. Let's start with the Steelers because it's one, and we can kind of
Yeah,
talk about that one, and then we'll dive into obviously both of the Eagles coordinators being obviously replaced at
yeah,
this point. So I mean, let's get into it, man. The Steelers, they only interviewed three people, and they
mhm,
ultimately decided to go with Arthur Smith. I guess that's what I'll say first is I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't interview more candidates. I could have seen them interviewing Clint Kubiak. I could have seen them
yeah,
interviewing Cliff Kingsbury. I don't know where Frank Reich kind of stands on, if he wants to stay in football or not. He was another guy I kind of pegged as potentially being a fit for the Steelers, but you know, my thing with Arthur Smith is this hire feels like it checks a lot of the boxes that the Steelers wanted in their new offensive coordinator
mhm,
from the sense of it's somebody who's got experience, it's somebody who has called plays before, and it's somebody who will commit to the run game. When he was with Tennessee, he committed to the run game with Derrick Henry. When he was in
mhm,
Atlanta, even though they didn't necessarily have that premier running back until they drafted Bijan Robinson last year, he committed to the run game in Atlanta. And whether fans like it or not, the Steelers are committed to running their offense through the rushing attack, and that's exactly what Arthur Smith is willing to do. So I have some skepticisms on it, but overall, I understand why this move was made versus going out and getting, a young offensive guru, somebody who's really focused on the passing attack and, is focused on doing all these new creative, innovative ideas on offense. That's not what the Steelers want to do. And that's, maybe that's not even necessarily what their personnel is built for. So they brought in an offensive coordinator who's built for their personnel. So I frankly don't hate the move. And I am somewhat optimistic for it because he's had success as a coordinator in the past with Tennessee.
yeah. I think this is a pretty. I mean, it's a safe hire for sure, but I think it's a good one. I think it makes sense. I mean, you just outlined sort of the boxes that he kind of checks, and it's just like like we've talked so many times, classic, hard nosed football, running the ball, very physical, the point of attack sort of thing. So I like that in the sense that because you have two really talented backs,
Yeah.
Jalen Warren and Najee Harris, and you have, I mean, Darnell Washington, who has a ton of upside, and he's already a really good run blocker. And I was looking this. I think he was actually Brooke Pryor from ESPN, who I
Yeah.
was reading something up on this, that Arthur Smith likes to use multiple tight end sets like very
Yeah.
often. I think he was most last year, last 3 seasons. So he'll probably get more playing time, and maybe he'll take off in the past game too. Like, I mean, I just like it all around. Obviously, the big question mark for me is like, what happened with Bijan Robinson? Why did he not use him like as much as he should have? Like that to me is my big, like, I don't know. That's where I'm skeptical. I guess is like, how
Yeah.
does he utilize the best players? Or I guess
So,
with Bijan's
so real quick, before we get into the skepticism, I want to talk about some of the positives on this. And you
yeah, yeah,
touched on it, the fact that he does run a lot of multiple tight end sets. And I actually read something very similar. And I'm trying to, I have so many notes on this. I'm trying to sift through it all, but he runs like there was a stat that I read in the Athletic that like he runs the most condensed like offense as far as everybody around kind of like the center of the football. It's a very tight set. He does
yeah.
not, and I mean this is something that like yes, the Steelers like do utilize the two tight end set. I would not shock me at all if they go out and draft another tight end or bring in another tight end because even with Pat Fryermuth and Darnell Washington, that's going to be such a key factor for them is going to be the use of the tight ends in the run game and ultimately building off the pass game.
Hmm.
When you look at Atlanta last year, I mean they had Kyle Pitts, they had Jonnu Smith, and I believe they had a third tight end that was pretty prominent that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. Another thing, the Steelers haven't had your prototypical fullback in 2 years now. I also expect that to change. He likes to
Hmm.
run a lot of two backs in the backfield. I think that's going to continue. I think he's going to bring in your prototypical fullback. It's they may still utilize Connor Hayward in some
Yeah.
respect in that nature, but it's going to be a lot of that. And I think we're going to see even less of the slot wide receiver to a certain degree. I mean, Allen Robinson, I saw the Steelers could save like $11 million this year by cutting him. And the
Hmm.
fact that Arthur Smith really rarely utilizes the slot wide receiver position wouldn't shock me at all if he's kind of gone come
Yeah.
training camp. I think he's just going to be a cap casualty because he's not going to be used a ton. So
Right.
to me, I think that's all very interesting, and I like the fact that he's prominent with the run game. The other thing that I really like about him too, Ricardo, how many times did this year did I talk about the Steelers struggling in the red zone? I mean, especially in the first half of the year while they obviously still had Matt Canada. I mean, it was a
Yeah.
constant plague for them when it came to scoring in the red zone. And um, when he was with the Titans, so the year before he became OC of the Titans were 23rd in red zone offense. In 2019 and 2020, when he was the offensive coordinator, the Titans were number 1 and number 2 in red zone offense. So I think that's going to be a huge boost for this team of just being able to find ways to score in the red zone. That's something that I'm really excited in. And then I just found that stat I was saying, but he was last in the NFL in 3 wide receiver sets.
Mm. Yeah.
In his time, I believe, both with the Titans and when he was with Atlanta. So that's where, again, you're going to see like the utilization of the tight ends and running backs is going to be huge. And he's going to build it off the run game. And kind of that smash mouth football. That's what Pittsburgh wants to play.
Yeah. And just in his 2 years with the Titans, I believe they were top three in rushing, and they averaged like 153 rush yards per game, which is an insane amount. Um, I mean, and you have
Yeah.
a solid offensive line already. Sure, you could upgrade here and there a couple of players, but still, you have some of those key pieces in place. Um, so if they can build that offensive line a little bit better, I think this could be a really difficult team to stop on the ground. I mean, it's just, especially with that two-headed monster, like I've been saying. And I also just want to say that it kind of takes some pressure off of whoever starts at QB, whether it's Kenny Pickett or Mason. That's a whole different conversation. But
Yeah.
that Ryan Tannehill had his best years like with the Titans. I mean, when he was
Yeah.
the offensive coordinator. So
He won
I mean,
comeback player of the year in 2019 with Smith in his first year as offensive coordinator.
yeah, exactly. So that could be a huge plus for Pickett and so on. Whoever plays QB well. I mean, that's a huge benefit to them, and
Yeah.
especially with all the scrutiny that's been kind of at the quarterback position. It's that's at least also helps them. Especially,
Yeah. Well,
relying on the run game a bit.
I think this is a great point to kind of transition into some of those concerns because you kind of brought it up where it's like, yes, he's had success with Ryan Tannehill. The one thing I will say, he's never been viewed as like a quarterback whisperer. Yes, he had his
Right.
greatest success with Ryan Tannehill. That's all well and true. You can also point to the fact, well, look at the mess he had with Desmond Ritter in the 2 years that he had him as quarterback. He was
Yeah.
never really able to get the best out of the quarterback room in Atlanta. Versus had you interviewed or brought in someone like, Cliff Kingsbury, who is known as being more of that quarterback whisperer, or the guy from tennis or the guy from the Texans, who I'm forgetting his name.
Slowick, Bobby Slowick,
Yeah, someone like that.
or yeah.
There's coordinators out there who are known as like, okay, these guys can get the most out of the quarterback. But again, it's like you said, he's committed to the run game, so it'll take pressure off these guys either way. So, you can also point to it, and this kind of leads into my next point a little bit, that I'm not really concerned about it, but a lot of what he does in the pass game is based off of the run game. So it's a lot of play action, and it's a lot of just looks that deceiving the defense, of making it look like it's a running play when really it's going to be a play action play. And my
Yeah.
main concern with that is, and this is from what I've read, his style of offense requires a lot of buy-in from the wide receivers and skill position players to, even if he preaches a lot. 11 guys need to block on a run game. And we know that
Yeah.
that can be an issue with the Steelers wide receivers, George
Yeah.
Pickens, Deontay Johnson. And his system also requires them to be deceptive. If they're not blocking on a run play, they're running around and making it look deceptive, like it's going to be a pass play, to draw more defenders and players in the secondary kind of out of or away from the line of scrimmage. So
Mhm.
his system demands a lot out of every player on the offense. And if you can't get consistent buy-in from, those guys like your wide receivers, I'm concerned that could lead to a little bit of a stagnant offense. But again, that's not necessarily a gripe on him as much as it is like the wide receivers have to do their jobs. So the wide
Yeah.
receivers have to buy in.
Yeah, that's kind of the bare minimum. It's just like you have to put in 100% effort. I mean, I know that kind of was an issue this past season, but I
Yeah.
mean, it's just maybe. I mean, Arthur Smith seems a bit more like a player's coach. I mean, if it seems like players loved playing or enjoyed playing for him, even if it was kind of like a different style of offense that maybe some players are accustomed to. But I mean, there's not really a choice here. You kind of have to buy in. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know, like you might not play as much. I mean, like Pickens. I
Yeah.
mean, these are really Deontay Johnson, George Pickens. These are really talented receivers. Like, if anything, this could maybe even benefit them if defenses are keying in on defenses. So, or sorry, on run games, run rush attacks so often. Like,
Yeah.
um, I mean,
Well,
it's a double edged sword for sure. But
and man, this is what I would do. I don't think this should be Arthur Smith himself, but maybe someone in that Steelers coaching staff. I don't know, maybe the wide receivers coach or just somebody kind of pull those two guys aside and just show some like clips or some stats from the 2019 and 2020 seasons of AJ Brown and Corey Davis, and just be like, look, guys, if you guys buy into this, like you'll get your yards, you'll get your
yeah,
touches, you'll get your TDs. Like, you just got to buy in and give 100% play in and play out. The offense will be successful. It doesn't require a star quarterback. It can be done with a guy like Ryan Tannehill. Like, it's perfectly possible that the ceiling of Kenny Pickett could still be Ryan Tannehill, and that can
yeah,
work in an Arthur Smith system. So
yeah,
it's things like that that excite me. And you kind of alluded to it earlier. The last kind of major concern with him is it's like, why wasn't there more production out of Kyle Pitts? Why wasn't there more production out of Bijan Robinson? Why wasn't there more production out of Drake London? Again, I think part of it is like, yes, this system is designed that like it's built around the run game. And,
yeah,
there is some deception of your best players are kind of drawing defensive backs away to kind of open things up for other guys. Like there is an element of that to this. Part of it, Kyle Pitts has been in the league for a minute, It's like
yeah,
Drake London, do we really know what his true potential is yet? I mean, is he
yeah.
it's possible he could be a star receiver. It's also
Mhm.
possible he could be a mid, a solid, 5 to 8 year wide receiver, and his career kind of feels like we don't know yet. I mean, Bijan Robinson, yes, you would have liked to see more from him. It was still just his rookie year. So it's like I'm also not going crazy that we didn't see this, fantastic production out of these guys in Atlanta. And maybe part of that too is the fact that when he has all these, head coaching responsibilities on top of being the play caller, maybe there's something where he's, the fact that he can focus on just being the OC and the play caller, that he can really kind of have complete kind of control and I don't know what the right word is, but kind of like complete control over the offense and how it functions. And maybe that can lead to, more benefits for, the skill position players on the roster.
Right. Yeah, I just hope that he can. I mean, yeah, it's certainly one thing to be an offensive coordinator. It's a totally different thing to have the role of head coach. There's so many other things that are involved with that. So, I mean, he was successful with AJ Brown, with Corey Davis to an extent. So, and then that's when he was an offensive coordinator. So it's like he just had to focus on running an offense, not any other responsibilities really. So, I think that he can certainly get back to that and utilizing his best players and giving them opportunities to succeed. Um,
Yeah.
it's just, like we've been saying, the players have to buy in. Pickens, everyone, every single player on that field, whoever plays a snap, has to buy into it. And I mean, hopefully that Deontay Johnson and George Pickens can kind of keep what's the word, like, keeps themselves in
Their
check a bit.
motivation. I mean,
Yeah,
I think a lot of it's just their motivation.
That's exactly that's there's only so much a coach can do, as we've talked about it a couple of times this season. So
Yeah.
it's really whether or not they have the motivation to buy in and really play every single down like 100%. So
And I'll say ultimately, like when I got the notification that he was hired, my like when I read the notification on my phone, I was happy. I was like, all right, I'm good with that. Out of
yeah.
the three candidates, I don't remember. I think Gerard Johnson was one of them. I can't remember who the third one was. That again, it was lesser known guys. I think it was the quarterbacks coach of the Texans and somebody from the Rams coaching tree. I think it was their
Oh yeah.
passing game coordinator. I don't
Zach
remember what his name was.
Zach Robinson, I believe.
Yes, yes. Like this was the one I was like, this fits what the Steelers are looking for right now. I'm happy with the move. I think it checks a lot of boxes. I think it also brings an outside mind, a fresh mind to the offense. I don't think there's going to be a lot of turnover in the coaching staff
Yeah.
with a lot of the guys that are kind of already there. I think it's going to be just kind of Arthur Smith implementing his thing and maybe adding a couple other guys. And kind of the last thing I'll say is it's like this is a guy. He's worked himself up all the way from being I think he was a student assistant at North Carolina.
Mm,
After he graduated, he played offensive line in North Carolina and was a student assistant coach after he graduated. And he's worked his way all the way up to being an offensive coordinator, a head coach, and now an offensive coordinator again. So this is a guy for as successful as his family is, coming from the founder of FedEx. Like he's worked for everything he's gotten, and I'm optimistic about what the Steelers offense could be, and I'm very pleased with the decision. So time will tell how it all actually plays out, but I think the Steelers made a smart move here, and
yeah.
I'm excited to see what Arthur Smith can do. So
Yeah.
that's kind of all I have to say on the Steelers and their offensive coordinator search. As for the Eagles, they were filling two voids
Oh, yeah.
when it came to the coordinators. So I'll let you choose which one you want to talk about first, and we'll start breaking that down.
So who got fired first? It was Desai, I believe.
I believe it
Um,
was Desai, and I think Fangio got hired before Kellen Moore.
yeah, it was officially announced the same day, I believe, but still, yeah. I'm gonna see. Here's my thing. I feel like I can't avoid this. That I'm gonna defend the former coordinators. Um, so I'll start off with kind of the firing stuff first. So obviously, Sean Desai was demoted to whatever the hell Matt Patricia was doing before. And Patricia being that on the field guy, the defensive coordinator, which was absolutely terrible on Nick Sirianni's part for making that decision in the first place. Again, panic move. We've gone over that.
Yeah,
So I mean, really, there was no. I mean, even if if I'm Sean Desai, I don't want to go back and be a defensive coordinator after getting demoted. Like, I just personally, I'll try my luck somewhere else. Like, that's just
yeah,
he certainly like he tried his best. Like he was his
It
defenses
was
were
bound
good.
to come to an end.
Yeah, like it was
There was no
inevitable.
mending that at that point.
Yeah, it was already fractured beyond repair. So that didn't surprise me that he was gone. And so they bring in Vic Fangio, who I mean they were on the verge of hiring last year before. I mean that it kind of. I don't actually remember what happened other than Jonathan Gannon kind of making his mind
I
up.
actually reread the timeline today, and I know like a lot of the blame goes on Gannon because he said like, "Oh, I'm staying in Philadelphia. I'm staying in
Yeah,
Philadelphia." And then after the Super Bowl, the Cardinals supposedly he claims called him up again about that because their position was still open, I believe, after the championship game. And that
yeah,
when he was like, "Yes, I'd be interested in that." And but it was like the fact that Gannon said he was coming back, and then Fangio took the job with the Dolphins, and
yeah,
then it sounded like either way, Sirianni really wanted to take someone from the Fangio coaching tree, which is why he pivoted to Desai.
yeah,
And it is unfortunate that it worked out that way because had they been able to get Fangio last year, they may have also brought in Desai in a lesser position, and both of
yeah.
them still may be here. I'm sure Fangio is still on very good terms with Desai, and he would probably like him on his staff, but that's just not going to happen for the reasons you just said. The relationship's already fractured.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just interesting how first off, like he parted ways with the Dolphins after one season. That to me was like, okay, that's I thought he would have stuck
Yeah.
it out another year or two because 1 year is like not enough. And I kind of repeat that with the Eagles every season, it seems like. But yeah, Fangio, I mean, the guy they wanted last season. I think, the Dolphins defense, say whatever you want. They dealt with so many injuries. I mean, Jalen Ramsey I mean, missed the first half of the season pretty much,
Yeah.
and then lost Bradley Chubb. Who was it that they lost? Oh, it was Jalen Phillips. They lost to like both season-ending injuries. Like there was only so much Fangio could do with his defense, and so on that part, I feel kind of bad. The Dolphins were 19th in defensive metrics. So they weren't great, but again, big part of that was injuries. So um, as in as it relates to the Eagles, I mean, I like the hire in the sense that it's someone with experience. You have like the actual guy himself, someone like Vic Fangio. I mean, you said it before. They wanted someone from the Fangio tree. And just seeing some of the things like Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, and I think Mike or Matt LaFleur, they when talking about like how to like who's like the defensive coordinator that kind of gives them the most headache, they all said Vic Fangio.
Mm.
Just because his defenses are like simple, at least on like pre-snap, but like then post-snap, it's like they'll give you a totally different look.
Yeah.
Um, so he's, I mean, a defensive guru for a reason, defensive, one of the best in the NFL, maybe all time defense, like just for a reason. Like he's just that good. So I like that we have him for experience. We needed someone, we went with younger Sean Desai, someone with not as much experience necessarily. So when you're getting the actual guy, that makes me feel good for sure. But a part of me is like, he's kind of getting up there in age too. I don't know how long he would stick around, and obviously the whole season. But the other problem is like Howie Roseman has to figure out how to better construct this defense because
Mhm.
linebackers for years, it hasn't been an important position. Safety as well. That's a position they need to figure out a bit more. So I mean, Fangio, I mean, he's had success though. Don't get me wrong about that. He's had
Yeah.
top 5 units with several teams, and he's been in the league for so long. So um, I'm I'm more optimistic about Fangio than I am about Kellen Moore, which I'll kind of get into. But I'm curious as
Well,
to what you think.
yeah, I like the fit of Fangio. I mean, it is frustrating that it's like, okay, you couldn't get Fangio last year, so your initial instinct is to just go and get one of his disciples, and then a year later you're just pivoting back to Fangio. I mean, it feels like a lost opportunity, but the thing is like you can't blame anyone for that because it was just the way things shook out with Jonathan Gannon and him
Yeah,
ultimately leaving to go to the Card. Like there's nobody that you can really place the blame on. I think the interesting thing to talk about with Fangio is the way that he kind of left Miami that you alluded to at the start of kind of your assessment of the hire. And it's like, it seems like the players have all been excited that he's leaving Miami, all the
Yeah,
guys on the defense. But again, I think that's more of an indictment on the players. And I read some stuff from the Dolphins' perspective today, and a lot of the writing was like, all right, the players maybe didn't like Fangio, and players today generally like more player-friendly coaches. But that's the thing with Fangio is it's like his system works and he can find success on defense, but you need the buy-in from the players. And if the
yeah,
Dolphins weren't buying into that, then ultimately they weren't going to be successful. So that's what it really comes down to. There was some stuff I read that maybe Miami players were buying too much into kind of that Miami lifestyle, weren't as focused on putting in the work, off the field.
right.
As maybe, other players in Vic Fangio systems have been in different locations. So maybe it just wasn't a fit. I don't know how his relationship was with the head coach, Mike McDaniel, down there, because McDaniel is full on a player's coach.
Yeah,
Obviously a much younger guy. So I don't know. Maybe there was just a disconnect there with Fangio, obviously being in his 60s. But I think it's a good move for the Eagles. I think bringing in kind of an experienced coach to coach that defense, I like it. And I think it's just another strong presence in the locker room. And I think he's going to get a lot out of the pieces that are still in place. And the thing with a Fangio style defense, like he needs a strong defensive line. And
yeah,
the Eagles have a lot of great defensive linemen right now, or guys that are on the rise, whether you talk about the Jalen Carters and the, Josh Sweats and the, Hassan Reddicks and Jordan Davis. Like they have a lot of players on the defensive line that it's like, okay, you have the base here of what a Fangio defense needs.
yeah,
And the other thing I kind of like about him is like people have asked him like, "Oh, how do you describe your defense?" And he never gives like any sort of, short response as to how to sum it up, because
yeah,
it's like I think that's just it. It's so tough for offensive gurus to figure out and dissect and game plan against, and it's like he's just adaptable, man. Even as he gets up there in age, he's always finding a way to get the most out of it and just constantly confusing off the opposing team's offensive play callers.
yeah. And I mean, I hope that the players buy in because I mean, last year was just such. I mean, this past season was such a struggle defensively. It's like I feel like the players will take anything better at this point. Like considering how it ended, I mean, they just couldn't even tackle. I hope Fangio really harps on the fundamentals, which I'm sure he will. Because I mean, the Eagles couldn't even do that. Like it was on full display against the Bucks and against the Giants. It was just bad all around. Like I just really hope he focuses on that. And I don't think this is going to be as big of an adjustment because I mean, yeah, Sean Desai was a disciple of his, so I'm sure the defense is somewhat similar, and maybe some of the verbiage too is also kind of similar. So maybe it won't be too bad of an adjustment for them. But I mean, yeah, they do have some of the players in place. They have some good young players, so it's just a matter of them adapting and kind of figuring it out. I just hope it doesn't end up like Miami, where it's like, oh, I'm glad he's gone. Like that, I really hope that's not the case. But again, that might
Yeah,
have been down to the players. But
yeah.
um, yeah, overall, I think it's a good, a pretty. If I had to give it a grade, I'd give it like a B plus
Did
probably.
the Eagles even interview anyone else for the position?
They interviewed what's his name, Mike Nelson. I believe the Bucks. Or they interviewed. Oh no, sorry, it's the Falcons' defensive corner slash defensive line coach. But
Okay,
the Jaguars ended up hiring him, so they didn't bring him in.
they rolled the
Obviously,
Fangio. Okay,
yeah. And they
all right.
also, I think, at one point were interested in Ron Rivera. They did interview him. Wink Martindale was potential candidate, but I didn't really see that happening.
Yeah,
So this one, just out of all the other candidates, he was certainly the best one. I mean, especially after leaving Miami, which was unexpected. So yeah, I'm glad they brought him in. But I guess we can flip it over to the
yeah,
offense.
yeah. I like the move on Fangio, and yeah, if you want to transition now, I don't have much more to say other than I think it's a good move for the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it works out. I feel better about them for some reason, schematically, than I do about Kellen Moore, which
Well, let's talk about it.
yeah. So actually, maybe I should start with Brian Johnson.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
so I feel I know there were times where I would just bang my head against the wall and be like, "What is this like play calling? Like, what is this situational football?" But I kind of took a step back and thought about it after the fact. And I was either like, you keep Brian Johnson if you're going to keep Nick Sirianni, or you just clean house altogether because it's just there were limitations. I mean, Sirianni never gave Brian Johnson full control of the offense. I mean, saw the reports that Sirianni would override him on certain plays, or I think even against the Bucks that Brian Johnson had one game plan and then Sirianni kind of blew it up or something like that. Like that just doesn't. That's not how that's supposed to work. So and also
Yeah.
just throughout the season I feel like Brian Johnson got so much of the hate, all of the criticism. And I'm sure he deserved a good amount of it. Fine, but you kind of have to remember this guy. It was his first season calling plays at the NFL level. He's a young guy, young, promising guy, and it's they were going to be growing pains. Like that was the thing I kind of said at the beginning of the season. Um, and maybe there were a few more bumps than expected, but still, it was just like Sirianni didn't really do him any favors by not giving him control of the offense and probably having too much of a say, too much of an influence. The point is, they were never really on the same page, it seemed like, throughout the season. So that's why the offense sputtered a lot of the time. The other thing with getting rid of him is this is now Jalen Hurts' third different offensive coordinator in 3 years.
Yeah.
So,
And on that point, from everything we've heard, Jalen Hurts had a very close relationship with Brian Johnson,
yeah,
which
that's
also makes it interesting. And I'm
yeah.
kind of
So,
in the boat with you where it's like if you're going to keep Sirianni, you might as well keep Brian Johnson that, at the start of the season when he got the promotion, everybody said he was going to be the next great offensive play caller.
yeah,
And after just to move off of him after 1 year does feel a little bit surprising to me, especially when you're keeping Sirianni. But maybe that disconnect between the two of them and what you talk about Sirianni just blowing up game plans was just too much, where they maybe behind closed doors, the relationship between the two of them was fractured as well.
yeah. I just think I don't know. Sirianni never gave him a full chance at it, and like I don't hate Brian Johnson at all. Like yeah, that the thing you talked about that he was close with Jalen Hurts. I mean that certainly sits a certain way for him, I would imagine, but it's just part of the business, I guess, that he'll get over. But still, it's not an easy thing to sort of overcome, I guess. And it's just, uh, man, I just Sirianni was too involved with the offense, and it just got to the point of no return, essentially. There was another point I wanted to make about Sirianni. Oh, the point that he said before the season that the offense wasn't going to really branch out or kind of expand. They were going to focus on the things that they were doing well already, which at the time didn't seem very alarming. But when you look at it now, it's like, well, no wonder this offense was so predictable. No wonder this offense was so bland and not creative at all. I mean, that's why they went out and got a totally different offensive mind and someone with different, fresh ideas, which I'm fine with. But and then it's the whole conversation of like, all right, well, Sirianni was asked, like, so what's your role if you're giving Kellen Moore the full control of the offense? And like, I'm just going to focus on what a head coach has to do, which I mean is kind of a not lazy answer, but it's just like,
Yeah.
well, what does that mean? Like,
Yeah.
you're just kind of a cheerleader on the sideline. Like, you're just like, are you going to change the way you approach training camp, like putting pads on? Like, there was no clarity on that. There's so much. That's again a different conversation altogether. But I just Brian Johnson. The point of this all, Brian Johnson was kind of the scapegoat. Um,
Yes. Which I
so
feel like that's kind of what we said when the Eagles got eliminated. It's like because Sirianni wasn't calling the plays and he wasn't really super involved one way or the other, like coaches like that just last a little bit longer because they have these scapegoats built in with their
yeah,
coordinators. And it feels like that's what happened with Brian Johnson.
yeah, it pretty much is, and it's a shame. But I'm glad he's getting more opportunities. He's gotten a few offensive coordinator interviews
He'll at
earlier.
the very least be a quarterbacks coach somewhere.
He should, yeah. But now kind of flipping back to right now with Kellen Moore. I mean, former Charger, former Cowboy, which kind of that in and of itself is kind of weird that he was with the Cowboys and used to play with them, and that's a different layer. That it feels a little strange, but it's not like he was unsuccessful. He was actually fairly successful with Dak Prescott. Kind of a bit iffy with Justin Herbert, but in his time with Dallas, I mean, they led the league in offense twice. So that's certainly something to be optimistic about. That potentially this team could. I mean, the team that is in need of different ideas, and a team that really needs that kind of struggled to score even like 20 points the last few weeks. I mean, this is it's or even move the ball for that matter, sustain long drives. I mean, this is an encouraging thing for the Eagles. And I, when I first saw this, I was like, all right, it's Kellen Moore. The name isn't as like prolific as some of these other guys, maybe not as promising as like a Bobby Slowick or a Ben Johnson kind of guy. But I mean, they weren't going to move laterally either. But, I think just looking at it and kind of diving into some of what Kellen Moore likes to do, lots of motion, which something the Eagles very much lacked the entire season. So that's good. At least maybe giving Hurts more opportunity to read a defense better because I mean you can tell off emotion if it's man or zone. So that'll
Yeah.
probably help Jalen Hurts. And just a lot of three receiver sets, which totally fine with me because you have two really good receivers, and the third one is, I mean, whoever that ends up being will probably be like serviceable enough to be effective in that offense. So it's definitely more expansive, a bit more creative than what the Eagles had. And hopefully this this works out because I mean
Yeah.
otherwise it's kind of over for Syria. But the other thing I forgot to say is Kellen Moore has been a part of uh like the last year. He's been how do I say this? With Jason Garrett, he was there last year before he got fired. And then with Brandon Staley, he was there the last year before he got fired. So
Which to me, like, you know what that reeks of to me? Because he was the play caller in both spots. It's like for maybe I'm wrong with this. He did have success with the Cowboys. I'm not trying to take anything away from that. It really feels to me like he gets a lot of praise for being this smart, offensive minded coach who's got a lot of innovative ideas, who's, really successful and all this. To me, I still feel like he's got things to prove. Like to me,
yeah,
it's still like there's no results that really back it yet to me. Like, yes,
right.
he's had like success in Dallas, but it's not like it was this blossoming success. I mean, they still moved on from him. Like the
Yeah,
Cowboys moved on from him. They felt they needed a different presence as their offensive coordinator. And it didn't work with the Chargers. Like even before Justin Herbert went down with the injury, like they weren't it was a fine functioning offense. Justin Herbert was having a good year, a good to very good year. But it's
yeah,
not like they were just blowing like teams out of the water and it was this high octane offense. How do you stop them? Which is to me sometimes feels like the praise that Kellen Moore gets. So to me, I
yeah,
still feel like he has a lot to prove.
yeah. He definitely
And
does.
maybe that is something where it's like the fact that he's there when these former head coaches get fired, that he's under, like maybe there's something to that, man, that like he's the play caller in these situations.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a sign that Sirianni's gone next year. I hope not. Well, I don't even know what I hope at this point, but I just hope for a competent offense, an offense that could actually move the ball and maybe commit to the run again. But I mean, Kellen Moore's not really known for that, and that's why the Cowboys moved on from him anyway. Or at least that was the explanation that maybe he was the scapegoat there too. But yeah, he does have a lot to prove, and I mean, yeah, he's a young guy though, which I mean, he does have all these creative ideas. It's just a matter of on Sundays, can you build a game plan that can get the best out of every single player you have on the roster? Because there's
Yeah.
talent. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, an offensive line that you know is still going to be solid. Um, and Jalen Hurts, who at one point was an MVP last season. I mean, you saw what happened when you had an experienced play caller once, which was the MVP season, and Shane Steichen. And I mean, I'm not saying he's going to replicate that, but at least maybe there's a shot that Hurts can get back to some that level to some degree.
Yeah.
But I mean, West Coast offense, it's kind of also what Sirianni does, but it's kind of a modified version of that. So I mean, I'm feeling somewhat optimistic, but it's just
Yeah.
you got to prove it.
You
Is
sound less optimistic about him than I am about Arthur Smith.
Yes, that's
Yes.
yeah, it is. Yeah, that's true. That's how I feel. I felt I when the Steelers hired Arthur Smith, I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good like hire.
Yeah.
And then when the Eagles hired uh Kellen Moore, I was like iffy. I still am a
Okay.
little bit, but
Then I have a question for you. And
yeah,
maybe this isn't the best comparison, but both of these guys became available for offensive coordinator positions this offseason because their head coaches were ultimately let go. Would you rather have Kellen Moore, who was let go after Harbaugh was fired, or would you rather have Eric Bieniemy, who was let go after Ron Rivera was fired, to be
oh
your
man,
offensive coordinator? So basically, I'm asking you, like, the Eagles didn't interview Eric Bieniemy, but he's still out there and available, I believe.
yeah,
He's a guy that's gotten flirt. He's been in talks about head coaching positions before. But also, it's like, does he still have something to prove? Because it's not like he completely changed the Commanders' offense last year, and there's
right.
questions about how much of it was built on Pat Mahomes. Which would you prefer, Eric Bieniemy or Kellen Moore?
I mean, if we're talking, yeah, I mean, I'd probably go Pianami just because he has more experience and he's had success in the past. Not to say that
Uh-huh.
Kellner hasn't, but like he's
Yeah,
been in the NFL longer, and I just think he's more proven. He's more established than. And say whatever you want about the Commanders playing, saying like, "Oh, this guy coaches way too hard" or something like that. That's what Jalen
yeah,
Hurts needs. That's the kind of
yeah,
coach that Jalen likes, like that someone that will push him to his limits, like or like someone who just pushed really hard. Like that's the kind of coach that he's kind of, or the kinds of coaches that he's been successful under. So, but
yeah,
I mean, I don't really know how Kellen Moore is personality wise. He doesn't seem like that kind of guy who's gonna get in your face necessarily, but I don't know. Well, we'll see how
well,
that shakes out.
yeah. I think that's all valid. I don't know if you know this off the top of your head. Do you know who else they interviewed for the position?
They interviewed what's his name? Hold on, I have it here. They did have Gerard Johnson on their list, but I don't think they actually interviewed him. They interviewed Kellen Moore. That's oh they had been interested. They were interested in Cliff Kingsbury. They didn't end up interview. Actually, I think they did interview him. Yeah, they did. Um,
Okay.
who else did they have? They had someone else. I just feel like there weren't many
See, that's
options.
just that's the thing that I wonder of. It's like, how big of a net were they casting? Because it felt like they landed on, and this was the feeling I got from the Steelers a little bit. But again, I'm content with Arthur Smith. Is it's like it just feels like they landed on these choices a little bit quickly. And for the Steelers, I know
Yeah,
they did it because there was another team that was interested in interviewing Arthur Smith, and Mike Tomlin like didn't want to lose out on him, so they gave him the position. It just
right.
feels like it's like there. I'm just curious, like what was the range of the net that was cast on these potential candidates filling these roles?
Yeah, Gerard Johnson, Cliff Kingsbury. They had someone from the Colts, and I'm blanking on his name. Or was it? No, it was Jim Bob Cooter, who
Okay,
used to be the what was the offensive coordinator of the Lions too. Um,
okay,
so that was
yeah,
that was kind of the net.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, let me ask you, and I don't know if you have something else you want to add on Kellen Moore, but I have one other question I want to ask you, but it's kind of a little bit more wide ranging of the coaching staff versus just the offensive coordinator. So I don't know if you have any final thoughts on Moore.
no, not right. I kind of said it all. I'm just like iffy about it, but
So let me ask you this. Given the fact that the way that the season ended, Nick Sirianni feels like he's on a little bit of a hot seat going into this season. I think it's fair to say there's questions about Kellen Moore. We bring up the fact that that Vic Fangio is getting up there in age, and Some questions about the way that he left Miami, only there for a year. Is this entire Eagles coaching staff on the brink of just being completely blown up?
Honestly, yeah, it might
Like
be.
if things don't go right, if Kellen Moore isn't the offensive coordinator we're hoping he becomes, or the play caller we hope he is, and Nick Sirianni's already on the hot seat a little bit, and Vic Fangio's age doesn't really gel with the players in the locker room, like this could be a widespread blow up of this coaching staff.
Yeah, I think it could be. I mean, I kind of was. I mean, a lot of Eagles fans were kind of advocating for it already this season. Um, this to me is like I don't have a great feeling about it. It's almost like delaying the inevitable, which I feel is going to be a complete blow up of the coaching staff. But um, yeah, man,
But it's like
I don't know.
once you start blowing up a coaching, I think the thing that's so frustrating is like with the Eagles going to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and this is a little bit of a broader topic, but the Eagles going to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and just this feeling that it's like, all right, they made it there, but they've got a window of like 2 to 3 years here where they'll be like Super Bowl caliber. It's like it feels like it's already closing with the early playoff exit, and now Jason Kelsey retiring, and you're starting to see other players get up there in age. Like soon enough, Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham will be retired, and we already
Yeah,
saw James Bradbury decline. And it's like it just feels like this window is closing on itself, where it's like if it doesn't work with this coaching staff and they got to blow it up and they move on from Nick Sirianni, like this window is going to close and they're going to have to work on kind of, I don't want to say rebuilding this roster, but like there's going to be changes that are going to have to be made to this. It's going to be kind of a new window that they're going to have to look to open. And it's just frustrating because of how good this team was 2 years ago. And just the thought that like, okay, they have a solid 2 to 4 year window where they're going to be one of the top teams in the NFC. And it just feels like if this coaching staff, if these hires don't work and Nick Sirianni isn't the guy, it just feels to me like the window's going to close on itself.
yeah, but I mean, you could also make the argument that as long as Jalen Hurts is the quarterback, that the window will never close. It's kind of what I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that about Joe Burrow. So I'm like,
I
that's
guess
sort
that's
of
fair.
my mentality. I'm just like, as long as Jalen's there, then I think the window is still open a little bit, at least a little bit.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. It does also feel like the window is closing, and maybe it has closed almost entirely. But it really hinges on this season. So it's a make or it almost like make or break for Sirianni. It's just like he doesn't. I think the expectation has to be the bare minimum. You win the division, and you make a deep run, whatever that means. At least the championship game, because I mean they had the opportunity to at least win the division this past year. I mean, they could have had the 1 seed for crying out loud. Like that.
Yeah.
That was all a possibility until that collapse. So um, it's just different players this coming year. Players leaving, and players will come in. But
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, man.
And I think it's that type of thing that like I'm really starting to realize it more. And this is something players have talked. I've mentioned it before. It's just every season's different, man. There's really not a lot of turnover. It's like
Yeah,
dynasties in football don't really happen anymore. Teams like the Chiefs are rare, and even them, they've done it this year a different way, like really leaning on their defense. And it's like they just roster turnover happens, coaching staff turnover happens, and it's one of those things where it's like even when you think you have a window, Dan Campbell, people were ripping him, but he said it. He's like, this may be our best shot to get as far as we did. Things
yeah.
aren't going to be the same next year, and that's just the nature of the sport.
See, but what also sets head coaches apart is your ability to adapt to the new players, the new year.
Yeah,
Andy Reid, I mean, Bill Belichick, I mean, some of the greatest coaches that have ever graced the football. Like
yeah,
they're so good at doing that. It's just like I don't know. I don't think Sirianni's been exactly great at that, but I mean, it's really just up to this season that we'll see. I mean, and he has so much. He's said that he has to go out and reprove himself, and I mean, it's winning that locker room back. Like it's not going to be easy. That he just if he can't do that, he's gone. Like
yeah.
it's just he might be gone even before the season's over if they're not doing well or meeting expectations. Like it's just I think that seat is like blazing hot. Like I genuinely do, but
Okay. I didn't
but
even have it at blazing hot. I had it at
no,
warm,
I
but
do. I
all
genuinely
right.
do.
All right,
I'm
sounds good.
concerned for
So
him.
so let's talk now. Is there any other Eagles news that you want to touch on? I mean, I have one thing I want to bring up with the Steelers, other news wise, and I guess we could talk about the Super Bowl because I don't know if we're going to do another episode before the Super Bowl actually happens. But any other Eagles news you have that you want to touch on?
Uh, no, no,
No.
not anything. No.
The only thing I want to say with the Steelers, I mean, there was a little bit of a hubbub, towards the end of the season about whether Tomlin was going to be back and everything like that. And Art
Yeah.
Rooney said in his press conference, like, they're going to work towards an extension this offseason. So I expect one to get done, and I'm happy about that. Like, Tomlin is the guy for me, and I've always been a Tomlin guy.
Yeah.
So, I'm happy that an extension seems imminent here, and he should be here for the foreseeable future. Outside of that, I mean, we'll be talking about the Steelers quarterback room all off season.
Yeah.
So there's not really much to dive into at this point. But that's kind of the only other thing where it's like it seems like the organization wants Kenny Pickett to be the guy, but I don't think he's gonna be I don't think the job's gonna be handed to him this offseason, whether it's Rudolph coming back or what else they do, but we'll dive into all that at future episodes.
Yeah, that's whew, yeah, that'll be a huge one. Huge, probably the biggest headline or biggest storyline this offseason for either team, really.
Yeah. So what do you make of the Super Bowl, man? Chiefs against the 49ers here. I have
God
to
damn it.
imagine you are rooting for the Chiefs in this one.
Yes, I am. Dude, oh my god. I was like, the Lions had it, man. What
They did
happened? What
have it.
was
It was
this?
right there, dude.
Dude, you should have
I
seen me
I bet on the Lions going into the game, and when they were up like whatever it was, like 21-7 or whatever it was, or 24-7, I believe at
34-7. Yeah.
halftime. I was like, do I cash out? And honestly, the reason I didn't was because I was too lazy to go and get my phone and cash out on FanDuel to see what the cash out would have been. But I ended up
Oh
losing the money on that. And I also put a live bet in on the Ravens when they were down. The drive where Zay Flowers fumbled, I decided to live bet like $20 on them because I just thought it was value and the Ravens were driving and it felt like they had enough. When Zay Flowers fumbled into the end zone and I lost that live bet, I mean, it was a bad day for me, the conference championship game.
Oh, devastated. Dude, that sucks. Oh man, I mean Zay Flowers, dude, absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
Discipline wise and man, Lamar Jackson too. I don't know what he crapped the bed in that game too.
Yeah. The
But
Ravens lost that game more than the Chiefs won it.
yes, and the same you can be said about the Lions. They lost that
Yeah.
game more than the Niners did. And I mean that IU catch made no sense. It shouldn't have happened. Like that's you had an interception there, and I can't believe it just falls right back to IU.
That play was absolutely the momentum changer. Had that not happened, I mean, I don't know if even with the Lions having such an awful second half, they still may have done enough to win that game had that play not happened. That was a complete momentum shifter. It gave them the ball, 50 yards downfield from where they were.
yeah, man, that was crazy. I mean, but I am cheering for the Chiefs. I'd rather Mahomes keep building on his GOAT, debate, his argument, keep building on that, than having to see Purdy lift a Lombardi trophy. To me, it's just, I know, maybe I am a Purdy hater. Maybe I am.
I'm going the other way, man. I'm pulling for the 49ers. I'm sick of the Patrick Mahomes. I'm sick of the Chiefs hype, man. As much as the Eagles Nation hates the 49ers, like, Deebo Samuel's been good for me multiple years in fantasy football. I think the Brock Purdy story of being an undrafted free agent and winning a Super Bowl would be awesome, or being Mr. Irrelevant and winning a Super Bowl would be awesome. I think a guy like Trent Williams deserves to get one. I'm pulling for the Niners. I'm sorry, man.
That's fair. I mean, honestly, this is the best team the Niners have had under Shanahan. And then this is the healthiest they've been too. So
yeah,
it's really
it's going to be interesting because the Niners haven't looked good in the playoffs, whether it was against the Packers or last week against the Lions. But it's like they were so good to close out the regular season. It's like, can they get back to that in this game against the Chiefs? To me, is the storyline on their end or is it going to be kind of the same stagnant nature and they just need breaks to go there? It's interesting because it feels like both of these teams kind of clugged their way into the Super Bowl, with the Chiefs going up against a Ravens team that beat themselves and the Lions obviously blowing such a big lead to allow the Niners back into that game. But I don't know. It should be interesting, man. You want to hear my lock of the Super Bowl?
Yes. I'm curious. Yeah, what is it? What is your lock?
I think it's plus 170 odds was what I got it at FanDuel. Brock Purdy and Patrick Mahomes combined 50-plus rushing yards.
Are you serious? That's easy money. I'm putting money on
Easy
that right
money,
now.
dude. Easy money.
Dude,
Purdy had 45 himself in the championship game.
I was gonna say, like, and Mahomes also just manages to scramble out of pressures anyway. So
Yes, and he
that's
had
so
a down game scrambling last week in the conference championship game, so I think he's due to bounce back. That's my lock, man.
dude, yeah, and especially with like the Niners who don't play the Chiefs very often, it's not like there's only so much you can do to prepare for a Mahomes, but like game action, it's a totally different thing. Like
Yeah.
you can try and keep Mahomes in the pocket or whatever method you try, but he's always gonna find a way to get out. So I would love. I'm putting that in whatever parlay I make, but
I would love for
that's
that to hit in the first half, and I get back from my ski race, get off the bus, turn on the game, and Patrick Mahomes has already rushed for like 40 yards, and Purdy had an 11-yard scramble. I just be enjoying the rest of the game. That'd be fantastic.
yeah. Listen, I as much as I don't really like both teams, I just hope it's a good game. And I mean, I'm going to be disappointed either way in some capacity, but
Yeah.
just please be a good game. Like, don't be a blowout or just, I'm not expecting to be like last year where it was back and forth, but I think it'll be like much more methodical this game.
Uh-huh.
I think the run game for the Chiefs will be, I mean, they've kind of been relying on that most of the playoffs and most of the season, really, because that's been their only like reliable thing. But I don't know, man.
I think the over under was set at 45. What do you make of that?
45. Oh,
I kind of
that's
lean towards the under, dude.
I kind of do too. And
The
I
fact
saw
that
this.
both of these teams kind of struggled to get to the Super Bowl, and dude, I think the over under of the Chiefs Ravens game was like 40, and it ended up being like 27 combined points or something like that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, these defenses are good. Like they're
Yeah.
pretty damn good. And if they do kind of go with the running formula, then possessions will be limited too. So scoring might be even, it won't be as much. So I honestly wouldn't be shocked if it was the under. Like, and the Chiefs have also won every game where they score 21 points. The Niners have lost every game that they don't score 21 points. So I mean, I don't know.
Oh, so
That
it's a race to who can who what happens? Do the Chiefs get to 21 or not? That'll ultimately decide it.
I think that yeah, I think they will. I think it could. Do you want to like predict the score of
Sure,
this game?
give me your prediction. Give me your prediction.
Initially, I had 27-24, but I think it's going to be 24-20.
I'm gonna go
Chiefs.
because you just gave me that stat. I'm gonna go 24-17 49ers. They're gonna keep the Chiefs from getting to 21, and then they'll win.
Oh, all right,
You
all right.
you just laid out the logic for me.
I did, yeah.
All right.
You better put
And then
money
that
on
would be 24. Let me I'm so bad at math.
That's 41. So
So the under
that's
hits.
the under. We're
All
both
right.
under. We're both
All
yeah,
right.
right? 'Cause you said
So
it was
so
40, 45, you said, or 40, what was it?
I'm
46?
pretty sure it was set at like 44 and a half.
Oh, then mine would just be under. But it's still under.
Let me double now I gotta double check this. I'm pulling it up now. The
That'd
over
be
under is 47 and a half. So the under would
Oh,
hit for
then we're
both.
both fine, yeah.
Chiefs
So
are currently plus 110 under. Dude, the Chiefs is plus 110 underdogs, man.
dude,
Like
stop making them underdogs, man.
that's what
It's
I'm saying, man.
Mahomes, man. Like this dude's inevitable.
Like as much as I'm rooting for the Niners, I may just have to throw some money on the Chiefs.
Dude, anytime I put any money, I feel like it always goes the other way. With
I
the
think
Super
I'll
Bowls,
sprinkle money. I'll sprinkle money on Chiefs money line because they're plus 110, but I'll also throw a little bit on 49ers spread of minus 2.5, which is minus 105, so pretty decent odds. So either way, I could potentially make as long as the Niners don't win by one, I'm good.
imagine they win by 1 point.
I'd have to I'd cash out my account and be done until March Madness. That's what I'd do at that point.
Yeah. That would be dude, that'd be devastating. There's no
All right,
way.
sounds good, man. Sounds good. What do you make of who's doing the halftime show this year? Usher?
Yeah, it's Usher, yeah.
Usher, man. There's
I
no
don't
hype
know.
behind it this year. There's
No,
no
I
hype behind it.
know. Like last year's got more hype, and then the year before was what was the year
Yeah,
before?
that was the Eminem, Snoop Dogg, Mary J. Blige.
That was last year, right?
No, that was the Joe Burrow Bengals.
Oh,
Bengals.
right. Wait, so who's
Yeah,
last year again? Oh, it's Rihanna. It's Rihanna.
Last
Oh,
year was
that got a lot of hype. That got so
Rihanna
much
got a
hype.
lot of hype. Last year was that whole ensemble, and then the year prior to that was the one in Tampa Bay. Your favorite, The Weekend.
Oh, yeah, even that, I mean,
That got hype. That got hype.
well, yeah, it's the weekend. I mean,
I remember like talking to you and a bunch of other people like, oh, what songs is he? I haven't talked about this Usher, and I'm a proponent of the halftime show. I sing
yeah,
my teeth right into it. Dude, it's like I'm so out on it. They gotta get it. They gotta get a big name back, dude. They gotta get like Billy Joel or someone to do the halftime show.
yeah, why not, dude? I mean, that would get more hype. Getting Billy Joel, yeah, that'd be
Dude, like,
something.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Dude, and I mean, you remember when we were like freshmen, bro, and they had the Shakira one, like that got so much hype, bro.
Yeah, oh
Shakira and
my
J
god.
Lo.
Yeah, dude, that was actually crazy, but
Yeah. Back when
that
like
was
Lady
like
Gaga and Katy Perry would do it. I mean, those were big names at the time. Now it all
exactly,
feels
it's
yeah,
yeah.
this one's not great. Not
Usher,
great.
if you had done this like 10 years ago, maybe this would be relevant, but I don't know. I feel like Usher's not really that relevant right now. Whatever. That's on whoever decided to make him the halftime performer. Maybe it'll
Yeah, I
exceed
guess
our
so.
expectations. Who knows, man?
Maybe it'll end up being really good. I'll go in
Maybe.
with an open mind for that reason.
Yeah, same.
All right, dude. Any final thoughts here as we wrap this thing up? I know we're going on a little bit of a tangent here, but
uh,
that's what happens. Any final thoughts,
Go Chiefs, go Andy Reid. He's gonna ride off in
dude?
the sunset, a Super Bowl winner.
How long is Joel Embiid going to be out for your 76ers?
I don't want to talk about it. We don't know yet.
Not looking great, man. My Knicks are looking
Really,
fantastic. I'll
really
say
spoiled
that.
Yeah, your
Go
Knicks
New
are on
York,
fire.
go New York, go. All right, man. We'll talk some other time. Until then, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Peace out. Bye-bye.